All right, diving right in with you today. We're going deep into the Sri Lankan diaspora, specifically in Australia. And our guide, well, we've got Yasmine Gooneratne's novel A Change of Skies, but, and here's a twist, we're also using an academic paper that analyzes this very book.
Oh, that's interesting. It's like having two perspectives, the story itself and then how scholars see it.
Exactly. It adds a whole other dimension. Now, this novel, it's a saga, spans generations. We start with Porat and Navaranjini, a couple from Sri Lanka. They arrive in Australia back in the 1970s, thinking, it's temporary. But get this, their whole image of Australia, it's from a childhood geography poster.
Wow. Talk about starting with preconceived notions.
Right. And the paper actually digs into that, the whole idea of these myths we have about other countries, especially the ones we might move to, often based on, limited info or outdated stereotypes.
Makes you think, what images do we carry around without even realizing it?
Absolutely. But before we get too far into Fareth and Navaranjini's story, let's take a step back. Define diaspora itself. The paper traces it back to, get this, the Greek word diasporian literally means to scatter seeds.
To scatter seeds. That's a powerful image. It's more than just people moving, isn't it?
So much more. It's taking your culture, your identity, your whole sense of belonging, and scattering it. It's not always by choice either. The paper talks about these push and pull factors driving migration, and Gooneratne illustrates this brilliantly.
Oh, she does.
Yeah.
Like with Farah and Navaranjini, the push out of Sri Lanka, the political turmoil, the limitations they felt. There's even this scene, a terrible traffic jam becomes the last straw for Farah. It's almost comical, but you feel the weight of it.
Oh yeah, it's like the everyday frustrations build up until it's too much. Then there's the pull of Australia. For Fareth, it's an academic opportunity, but he also has this, almost naive view of Australia as this cultural wasteland, which, well, the irony plays out as the story goes on.
And that feeds into what the paper's saying about pull factors. It's not just jobs or freedom, but the image a country projects. Could be a land of opportunity, even just the exotic other. These images shape expectations before reality hits.
Which, as we all know, rarely match up. Now, here's where the novel gets even more fascinating. It's not just Butthart and Navaranjini's story, but we also get his grandfather's diary from the 1880s.
Oh, wow, a parallel narrative. 3 different experiences of diaspora woven together. Edward in the 1880s, running from a broken heart, family issues. Then you have Parat, the academic facing cultural clashes, and Navaranjini navigating this new world in her own way.
And that's barely scratching the surface. But focusing on Edward for a moment, the paper highlights how his story shows how diaspora evolves over time.
It's incredible, really. Here's Edward over a century ago, but some of his struggles, they echo what Hart goes through. Feeling in between, that pull between homeland and the new place, it transcends time.
And it raises some big questions.
Yeah.
Like, how much do these challenges stay the same? How do they change with each generation? It's like Gooneratne is asking us to trace those threads, the continuity and the shifts.
It's a huge question, and one that deserves a deep dive, wouldn't you say? Yeah, it's like we're seeing those patterns repeating, but also shifting. Fascinating stuff.
Definitely. And she doesn't shy away from the hard parts either. The paper, really goes deep on adaptation versus assimilation. And Gooneratne brings those ideas to life.
Oh, absolutely. Adaptation, that's more like the surface stuff, adjusting practical things. New language, social customs, all that. But assimilation, that digs deeper, right? It's internalizing the host culture's values, their norms. Sometimes to the point where, you question your own.
And that's where it gets tricky, that internal struggle. In the novel, even something like the name shortening thing, Karat becomes Barry, almost like a symbol, a microcosm of that tension between holding on to who you are and fitting in.
It is, right. It seems small, just a name, but it represents this bigger internal shift. And it makes you think, how much are we willing to change to be accepted? Is it really just a name, or is it, a piece of ourselves we're letting go of?
It's a question that goes beyond immigration too, right? Like, we all adapt in different situations.
Yeah.
But in diaspora, those choices, they feel bigger somehow.
They do. And Gooneratne, she doesn't give easy answers. She shows us this whole spectrum of responses. Like, there's Balapan Koyako. He completely resists assimilation, insists on using his full, elaborate name, almost like he's making a statement.
Oh, Koyako. He's hilarious, but you also sense this anxiety there, like clinging to his name as if it's the only thing keeping him afloat in all this change.
And that anxiety is real. It's the fear of losing yourself, becoming someone new and losing the old. But what's interesting, the paper suggests that resisting, like Koyako does, it can isolate you too. It's about finding that balance, preserving your heritage, sure, but also embracing the new.
And maybe that balance, it looks different for everyone, doesn't it? There's no one right way to handle diaspora.
Exactly. What I like is Gooneratne doesn't just focus on the individual struggles. She shows the dynamics within the Sri Lankan community itself, the tension between those who assimilate and those who see it as betrayal.
Oh, totally. She captures those judgments, the almost comical way expats sometimes look down on those who haven't adapted as quickly. There's that great quote about expats complaining about everything when they visit Sri Lanka, the food, the sheets, everything. Funny, but it reveals something deeper too, right?
Yeah, like insecurity maybe, overcompensating for their own sense of not quite belonging.
It's like they're trying to prove they fit in the new place by pushing away the old one.
Yeah.
But Gooneratne is so good at weaving these observations in with humor. We laugh at the absurdities of cultural clashes, but she's also making us think.
Oh, her satire is so sharp. Like that scene with Bharata and Navaranjini at a university event. Suddenly, everyone wants him to be the expert on all things Asian. Ancient philosophy, the Kama Sutra, you name it.
Right. As if being from Sri Lanka makes him an authority on all of Asia.
It's so spot on about how we exoticize and stereotype other cultures. People can't see past the foreignness to the individual.
And she doesn't let the Sri Lankan community off the hook either. She pokes fun at those who've become so assimilated they've lost touch with their roots. It creates this funny but thought-provoking tension.
Absolutely. And this is where Edward's story, Harat's grandfather, adds another layer. His experiences in the 1880s, they highlight that these challenges of belonging and identity, they're not new, part of the immigrant story for generations.
It's like she's creating this conversation across time, showing us these struggles that go beyond specific eras or cultures. It makes you wonder, even outside of diaspora, how much are we shaped by those who came before us? How do their stories echo in our own lives?
That's a big question, right? And the paper touches on it too. It says, Gooneratne is challenging us to see diaspora not as this straight line from one place to another, but as a cycle. The past informs the present shapes the future. It's all connected.
So it's not just leaving one place and arriving in another. It's this ongoing process of figuring out who you are, weaving together different experiences and memories.
Exactly. And that's where the heart of the novel lies, I think, in those moments where characters are grappling with nostalgia, that longing for a past that, well, you can't ever really go back to.
Yeah, it's such a powerful emotion, that nostalgia. It can be comforting, but also, like you said, make you feel even more lost.
Exactly. It's like you're holding on to these idealized memories, but they don't always match up with reality. And A Change of Skies, oh, it captures this so well through how the characters relate to their past. Farhat and Navaranjini, for them, Sri Lanka is all about the senses, the smells of spices, familiar songs, the feeling of family gatherings.
But those memories, they also come with sadness.
Yeah.
The realization that things have changed, both the place they left and themselves.
It's like they're mourning something that's not even gone, just different. And the paper talks about this leading to a kind of fragmented identity. You're split between who you were back home and who you're becoming here.
Yeah. Right, and it's not just a feeling. Gooneratne uses those letters and diaries to really show this. They become like physical connections to the past, these ways for characters to try and grasp onto what's gone.
Oh, absolutely. Like when Farhat finds his grandfather's diary, it's not just some old book. It's a voice from the past speaking directly to him, offering this whole other perspective on the immigrant experience.
And those letters between Farhat and his family back in Sri Lanka, there's so much in them. Love, longing, but also this tension, They're trying to stay connected, but their lives are pulling them in different directions.
It's heartbreaking sometimes. And Farhat, he says it outright, that feeling of being a stranger in both countries, not fully Sri Lankan anymore, but not Australian either.
Stuck in between, like you said earlier.
Okay.
It's such a universal feeling, I think. Anyone who's moved away from home, even if it's not to another country, you can relate to that sense of displacement, like leaving a part of yourself behind.
Definitely. And Gooneratne, she doesn't sugarcoat it. The sadness and the struggle are all there. But then she brings in humor, these moments that are almost absurd, and it makes the characters, well, they feel human.
That's what makes her writing so good, right?
Yep.
She gets the complexity of diaspora, but it's not overwhelming. It's like she's saying, hey, this is tough, it's messy, but there's still joy to be found. Laughter, too.
Exactly. Finding humor in the hard times, that's resilience. It's recognizing that even when we feel lost, we can still create meaning, connect with our new world.
So wrapping up this deep dive into A Change of Skies and the whole idea of diaspora, I think we've learned a lot. The novel, along with that academic paper, gave us this insight to the Sri Lankan experience in Australia, but also so much more. Those universal themes, migration, identity, belonging, that goes beyond any one culture.
Absolutely. And the way Gooneratne tells this story, it lets us engage with these big ideas without getting bogged down. The humor, the multiple generations, those little moments where you see right into the characters' hearts, it's all so well done.
It really shows you the power of literature, doesn't it? Taking you to different worlds, helping you understand the human experience, those moments where you think, oh, I see things differently now.
And if this deep dive has made you curious, go find A Change of Skies. Read it for yourself. You might see your own experiences reflected back, even if you've never been to Sri Lanka or Australia.
Thanks for joining us today. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep finding those stories that help us understand the world and ourselves a little bit better.